Hi guys, it's Kirsty. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about real event OCD and how the principle of unconditional self-acceptance can be applied when we're working on our recovery to become less stuck on this real event OCD. But before I go into that, as always, I would like to ask, please do subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button below in order to stay up to date with new videos as they're released. Please also do click on the like button if this video has been helpful for you, and please do feel free to comment below if you've got any suggestions of videos or if you want any extra tips or anything like that in a video, please do comment below. So with real event OCD, sometimes people can feel like theirs is different because theirs is based on a real event. And obviously that's, well, I say obviously, I mean, what you quite often find once you've been working on OCD recovery for a while and chatted to other OCD sufferers and done a bit of research, you quite often find that it's not uncommon for those of us who suffer from OCD to feel like ours is different for one reason or another. That's all part of OCD's ploy to keep us kind of fully engaged in the fear cycle, keep us doing compulsions because it thinks it's keeping us safe. So firstly, just because you're finding yourself stuck on something that went on in the past, as opposed to something that you're kind of doubting to be real or not, i.e. false memory OCD, or whether you're doubting whether you're doubting a relationship or sexuality or whatever that might be. Just because you're having doubts and frequent obsessions about something that went on in the past, it doesn't mean that your OCD is particularly hard to treat, or that it's you're unique and you're the one different one. Because anyone who has had any type of kind of OCD theme can get stuck on a real event as well. It's basically anything, if you have a thought about something that essentially triggers your alarm system, you say that, if you feel like you acted in a way that goes against your kind of value system, I suppose, or morals, what you believe is right and wrong, what you believe yourself to be as a person, what you believe is acceptable, then you can get stuck on it. So whether that is something that you actually did and you're doubting if you did the right thing or not, or if it is a false memory, or if it is, if you're doubting, for example, your relationship, you might start thinking there's something that happened actually, and was that actually inappropriate? Anything, it's not something that's completely different, and it's not another level of kind of unrecoverable is what I'm saying. And what also is kind of good to note is that there will always be times in our lives where maybe, whether you've got OCD or not, you might find yourself questioning, did I respond to that scenario in the best way, or did I hurt that person's feelings, and things like that. And, people can easily beat themselves up over, a perceived mistake in the way they dealt with something, or a perceived mistake in their behaviour previously, whether or not they have OCD. And the whole idea of unconditional self-acceptance, which is what I'm going to be talking about in relation to this in this video, which we talk about a lot on this channel, that can be applied whether it's OCD or not. And the thing is, so I did a video recently about OCD and guilt, talking about how unconditional acceptance can help us free ourselves from chronic guilt, so that we're kind of better able to act in our own best interest, i.e. when it comes to OCD, not performing compulsions and avoidance behaviours. When I was talking about that, I was talking about the idea of unconditional self-acceptance and, and how we can work on reducing the feeling of guilt, because it's such a strong emotion, to be a feeling of maybe concern as well, so that we're better able to sit with it, and it helps to slow down the thought process. So we're not desperately trying to rid ourselves of that kind of stomach churning kind of guilty feeling. And the thing is about unconditional self-acceptance is that we're not saying, so say if we're talking about, chronic guilt from a false memory or something, the idea of unconditional self-acceptance isn't saying, okay, that's fine then, I'll work on unconditional self-acceptance so I can accept myself as long as it's OCD. The whole point of it is the word unconditional, and unconditional means without exception. You are accepting yourself as a person regardless of whether it's, whether the thing that's upsetting you and making you feel chronically guilty is a real event or not, because it's unconditional self-acceptance. But what I'm saying here is that while you want to work on unconditional self-acceptance, regardless of whether something's real or not, I will always stress this is not letting yourself off the hook necessarily, saying, oh, it doesn't matter, I can just then do what I want, I can just be a sociopath or whatever, and I won't care anymore, whatever. You're still holding yourself accountable. You can still feel regretful of your actions and learn from them and aim to do better in the future. But the whole idea of unconditional self-acceptance is that we kind of can let go of that, like I say, that kind of feeling of guilt that kind of almost makes you feel like you're under a spell of guilt. It kind of, it's chronic. And with OCD and things that might make us feel kind of, obsessions that cause the guilty feeling, it causes us to, react very quickly, and the thinking becomes very quick, and, and then the mental analysis is very quick, and you can't, don't feel like you've got the control over it, and you don't feel like you've got the kind of the choice almost internally to accept uncertainty. So this is where the unconditional self-acceptance comes in. But in terms of applying it to real event OCD. So firstly, when we talk about real event OCD, we're talking about that, you're maybe analysing a situation that happened previously, and you're kind of essentially torturing yourself about it over and over again. Whether that's, whether you're kind of trying to work out whether you reacted correctly, or whether your actions might have upset somebody, or whether your actions might have caused something to happen later down the line, or whether a scenario happened and whether your kind of your interpretation of it was reflective of reality. The more you go into this kind of analysis of, was my reaction right? Did it happen this way, or did I cause something else to happen? The more you go into that and analyze that and do the, various compulsions, whether that's kind of checking on the internet, asking people for reassurance, whether it's confessing to relieve feelings of guilt, or whatever, the more you're doing that, the more you are reinforcing in your brain that you can't accept what you're afraid might have happened. You can't accept it. You're writing yourself off as a human being because it's just completely, it just makes you bad, and you're just not gonna, you can't live with yourself. So the idea of unconditional self-acceptance is that we see ourselves as a human being who has intrinsic value just for being a human being, and who is capable of good and bad acts, capable of making mistakes, capable of doing great things, capable of making mistakes and learning from them, capable of maybe even going through phases in your life where you acted in ways that you're not proud of. But that doesn't mean that you're written off as a person, that if you acted in ways that you can perceive as being bad, that you are a bad person. So what we want to do is move away from labeling ourselves as either good or bad. It's like, basically saying that in all aspects of your life, you have to be 100% good at all times. And that includes every thought that you have as well. You can't possibly have a bad thought. And that is completely, nobody is like that. We're all capable of making mistakes. We can all misjudge things in the moment. And another thing to bear in mind is that everybody's perspective on events is different. So you might have behaved in a way that you're now stuck on thinking, oh my God, that was not the right way to handle that situation, or whatever it is you might be stuck on. Somebody else might view that and think, I don't think that's that awful at all. Or somebody might think, yeah, I think you acted perfectly, understandable, So that's another thing to bear in mind when you're looking at, how awful you think the event that took place that you're involved in really is. So with the principle of unconditional self-acceptance when it comes to real event OCD, is that regardless of what it was that you're kind of terrified that you caused previously, it's helpful if you can look at yourself, not label yourself, even if the thing that you're terrified of did happen and something that you did might have caused it or whatever it is. Even if that is the case, whatever the feared scenario is, it doesn't mean that you are an all bad person. It doesn't mean that you have to carry this chronic guilt throughout the rest of your life and the whole rest of your life is written off. You can think, okay, well, if this thing did happen or I made a mistake here, well, maybe I can, learn from it. And by that, I don't mean you have to start, if you are afraid that you cause something to happen, what you don't want to be doing is overcompensating then. Oh, I'm going to be especially nice going forward, because if you think about what that is doing a compulsion, because you're saying that is 100% the case. And so I'm going to act in this way. Because what is actually going on here is that you're doubting something and whether you dealt with something in the right way or not and all of that. And what you want to be doing is continuing with your life, living your life as if, recognizing, is this, this is whatever happened, whatever went on in the past, whether you kind of dealt with it correctly or whatever it might be. You don't need to be answering that question in your mind, because the more you're doing that, the more you're kind of moving away from the tolerating of uncertainty there. But if we are also talking about something that you did that you genuinely know for sure that you did it and you consider it to be morally wrong, what you can do is accept that you made a mistake in that moment. Your life was as it was back then, your perspective was as it was back then. You take on board that you did something crap. Maybe if you hurt a partner or if you upset one of your best friends, and say if it's something like, it's not, in this case, maybe it's not even doubting whether you did the right thing or whatever. You feel quite confident that, looking back, that was the wrong thing to have done. But you're kind of, maybe you're beating yourself up over it, whether it's OCD related or not. Still here, even if you did do something back then and you made that mistake, you can feel regretful about it. And yeah, you could even, and this is when I'm talking about non-OCD related, you can work on sort of, let's see how I can not make that mistake again in future, because it's not useful to kind of repeat bad habits that kind of take us away from where we want to be in life. If you did something in the past that was unhelpful to your life and you feel regretful over it and you feel sorry over it, that's okay. You don't have to write yourself off as a human being. Hold some compassion for yourself. You feel regretful. That is not a pleasant emotion, so hold some compassion for yourself as well. But what you don't need to do is make yourself suffer for eternity by holding on to chronic guilt, telling yourself that you're an awful human being because you did something that was against, maybe your morals or something. So I hope this makes sense, because I've tried to talk about it from a perspective of, OCD and just generally in life, because even as for myself, for example, as somebody who has OCD, I could still find myself thinking, actually, the other day I was a bit out of order, and not feeling, and feeling a bit crap about myself about it. And you can find yourself, so this idea of unconditional self-acceptance is applicable with OCD or not. And it's applicable whether you're caught on a false memory, whether it's a real event, and that you're a real event OCD you're having obsessions about, or whether it's just a real event that you're not having obsessions about, it's just something that happened in the past. Unconditional self-acceptance is applicable because this is your kind of life. Nobody else is going to live it for you. You're responsible for yourself, so you can choose to not allow yourself to make any mistakes or whatever and write yourself off and just say, I'm bad, and maybe, I'm bad, maybe I'll just continue behaving in certain ways, let's reinforce that. Or you could say, yeah, I did something bad. Let's try not to do it again. I'm also capable of good stuff as well. I'm not going to base my entire worth on one thing that I did, or even 3 things that I did, or whatever. You don't need to write yourself off as a human being. And what can help you think about this is if you think, certain people may have hurt other people in the past. Maybe there's some people, some people can have patterns of behavior where they kind of act in ways where they upset people. But if we try and let's think about what events have taken place in that person's life that may have kind of caused them to kind of act in that self-defeating way. Also, if that person is acting in that self-defeating way repeatedly, that's not good for the people that's kind of had that inflicted on them. It's not good for them either, because people aren't going to want to stick around. So, maybe you can find some compassion for somebody. Maybe somebody's suffering and that's why they've inflicted pain on other people. Like, say if somebody has a habit of pushing people away in their life, maybe things have happened to them in their lives that kind of has caused their mind to process things differently. We don't want to write that person off as a human being, do we? I mean, surely, why can't we? So if we can have compassion for that person that we're thinking about that may have suffered in their life, and so that's why they're, perhaps they're repeating patterns of behavior or whatever, why can't we hold at the same level of compassion for ourselves if we make a mistake? Why are we different? Why are we on such a higher level that we cannot make any mistakes? Why do we have such inhuman expectations of ourselves? So if you start looking at things like this can really help you with practicing that self-acceptance. Compassion is a huge aspect of it. So yeah, looking at other people, you might look at somebody with mental health conditions that people may suffer with that maybe sometimes cause them to act out of their own best interest, and maybe other people can get hurt in the process. But do we write that person off as a human being? No, because that person, that stuff might have happened. Like I say, stuff is going on with that person, and yes, it's not great if other people got hurt. That's crap. But it's not always so black and white, and this is the whole thing that's really helpful for us is trying to take away that black and white and learning to live in the grey a little bit, because it's living in the grey where that's where we can find the higher comfort with accepting uncertainty, essentially. So I hope this video has been helpful. I've tried to kind of cover off real event OCD, but also if some, whatever's going on in real life, because, there are aspects, you can find yourself stuck on a real event and keep replaying. And it might be that maybe you behaved out of your own best interest in that real event. And you're struggling to accept that, or it might be that you're struggling to work out if you did react in the right or wrong way. So either way, as I said, the idea of unconditional self-acceptance is applicable here. And it's looking for that compassion and looking at how you can find compassion for other people who may have made mistakes in their actions previously. And the more you can do that, the easier it becomes for yourself as well. And then you're better kind of able to, as I said, bring those feelings of chronic guilt down to regret. And it's where we look at regret that we think, okay, so how can I, act a bit more in my own interest in future, to in terms of my own best interest, being treating others around me more how I'd prefer to treat them, or whatever it might be. So I hope this video has been helpful. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Bye.